So in this lesson, we're going to go to how to get data ready for a machine learning model. And a model doesn't take data that is missing or data that is not numerical. So let me upload a CSV file that doesn't have all numerical values in it so I can show you how. And we're going to go over a list of ways of how to change categorical values in a data frame into numerical. So the first one I'm going to show you is how to do it manually, and this is probably the most tedious one. So let me load a data frame. So p.read_csv. The name of our data frame is diabetes.csv. And this will be available in the description in case you want to follow along. So let's take a look at that. Let me do .head. You don't need to see everything. And you see we have some male, normal, some categorical values in our data frame. And we need to change all of this into numbers for our machine model to work. So here is a diabetes data frame, and what we want to predict is whether someone has diabetes or not. This is all the features. We're going to use all these features to predict whether someone has diabetes or not. But first we need to get the data ready and change it into numbers. So first I'm going to print the unique values of all the categorical values in our data frame. So let me write the first line. And let's see the gender column. And we're going to use the unique function in pandas. And you see the unique values is male and female. So right now I'm going to do this for all the categorical values, and I'm just going to speed through it. If you want to follow along, once I'm done, just press pause and then you could copy what I'm doing. And now let's run our cell. And we see we have all the unique values. Oh, I spelled exercise wrong. And here we have all the unique values. So next I'm going to turn these values into numbers. Like I'm going to turn male to 1, female into 0. And I'm going to do this using the map function. And then we want to turn male to 1 and female to 0. Again, you could speed through this because I'm going to do this for all of the variables in the column. So now let's look at our data frame. We have 2 curly braces here. Oh, the diagnosis should be yes and no. So I'm going to put yes here. And no, that's why it's giving us an error. So let's run all the cells, because if we run this cell over, it's going to overwrite everything and show not a number. So let's restart. And here you have it. We turned our data frame into numbers, all the values in our data frame into numbers. This is a tedious way of doing it, and there's much more easier ways of doing it, which I'm going to show you down the line. So the next way we're going to learn how to change the data frame into numbers is using pandas dummies. So let me write a markdown. Change categorical data to numerical using pandas get dummy function. So now let's load another data frame. I'm gonna give it a different variable, pd.read. And let's take a look at that. And here we have the original data frame. So when we're changing categorical data to numerical using getDummies, what happens is it's gonna create two, like for gender, it's gonna create two columns. We're gonna have gender male and gender female. And if the row is a male, we get a 1 for the gender male and then a 0 for the female. Same with blood pressure. We're gonna have blood pressure normal, blood pressure low, and blood pressure high. And if the blood pressure is normal, we're gonna get a 1 under the blood pressure normal and a 0 for the rest of them. So let me do that. But before we do that, we need to split our categories and the target into X and Y, because we don't need to change the Y. We just change it into ones and O's, because if we do, the target will have 2 columns, and that's not what we want to do. So let's split. And we want all the columns except the diagnosis. It's capital D. And we set the axis to 1 because we're dealing with a column. And then we set Y to the diagnosis column. So let's look at the X. And you see, we have all our features in the X variable. And the Y is a series of our Y column, of our target. So now let's change the X variable into dummies. df underscore dummies X is equals to pd.get underscore dummies. And the parameter we put in our X. Now let's take a look at our dummies X variable. And like I said, it separated the categories for hair, gender female, male. And if the row is a male, we get a true hair. If it's a female, we get a true hair. Same with blood pressure. We get all the unique values in the blood pressure column, and we put it here as a column or as a category. And if it's normal, it will be false, false, and true. But this still won't work for our machine learning model. So we need to change this into dummy variable. Right now it's in Boolean format. So let's create a function to change this Boolean into an integer. Convert Boolean to int. So I'm creating a function that changes the Boolean data type into an integer. So then I'm going to say return the data frame dot the as type function, and we want it changed to an integer. So now let's apply the function to this data frame. df underscore dummies. Let me put a T right here so we get it right. And then we want to convert Boolean to int. And in between brackets, we put our data frame dummies X. So now let's take a look at it. And you see we changed the true and false to ones and zeros. But this is only our X variable. We need to add the Y to the data frame. So we're gonna concat the series along this data frame. So I'm gonna call it final numerical data frame. Set that equals to pd.concat. And then we want the df dummies, which is this variable. Let me just put the head so we could see. Underscore X. And then we want to concatenate the Y where we stored our target or the diagnosis column. And then we set the axis to 1 because we're dealing with the columns. Now let me look at the final numerical data frame. Let me look at the head, the top 5, and let's go all the way along. But we see it's still in yes and no form. So let's change it into ones and zeros. If you remember how to do that, final underscore num dot df, the diagnosis column. That's underscore df. And then we could just press tab, and then we see it completes whatever we wrote previously. And we want the diagnosis. And then we're gonna map. We want the yes to be 1 and the no to be 0. And then let me cut this from here. Control X to cut. Then I'm gonna paste it here. Let's run that cell. And let's slide to our diagnosis, and we see we completed our data frame. We turned all the categorical columns into numerical columns. So another way we can do this is with pandas catcodes. Let me write a markdown for the heading. Changing categorical data to numerical using pandas catcodes. And pandas catcodes is an easier way or less coding to do what we did here. So let me load the original data frame again. And you see we have our original data frame. But before we change the catcodes, we need to see the data type of our data frame. And we see the columns that doesn't have numbers, it's the object data type. Before we use catcodes, we need to change the object's data type into categories. So let me write a function that does that. So define a function, convert O for object to categories. And then we're going to create a for loop. So for a column in our data frame, we're going to use the select dtypes function. And the data types we want to select is the object, column. And we're going to change the column, those columns, to a category using the asType function. The next thing we want to do is return the data types so we can see it. So now let's use our function. And we're going to put our diabetes data frame. Let's run this cell. Let's see if there was a mistake or not. Oh, it should be a period here, not an underscore. Let's run that. And you see we changed our objects to categories. Now we can use pandas get dummies to change the categorical values in the data frame into numerical. And we're going to create another function to do that. So let's define convert C for categories to codes. Then we're going to do a for loop. So for column in our data frame. Then we want to select the categories column. And we're going to change the values to codes. And then we want to return the data frame. So now let's use our function on our data frame. On the diabetes underscore CC. Let's run that. Oh, I spelled category wrong. Let's rerun that cell. Oh, it should be include, no S. And also remove the S from the column. And you see we did the same thing. For gender male, if it's a male, we get a 1, female, we get a 0. Let's go up here. Male, female, male, so it should be 1, 0, 1. And if we go here, 1, 0, 1. So another way we could change our data frame to all numbers in the data frame is using OneHotEncoding with sklearn. So let me write a heading. Changing category code data to numerical using sklearn OneHotEncoding. So let's reload our data frame. I'm gonna call this diabetes E. should be diabetes E. Making a lot of mistakes. Let's run that, and you see we have our original data frame. And OneHotEncoding is almost like pandas get dummies, so we'll split the features and the Y first. Let me just scroll up and copy what I wrote before. Control C to copy. Bring that down, paste. Then let's look at X. And you see we have all our features in X, and the diagnosis column will be in Y. So to turn the categorical values into numbers using sklearn, we need to import sklearn. So from sklearn pre-processing, we want to import OneHotEncoder, and then we also need to import the column transformer. And next we're gonna put all the categorical features in a variable. Categorical underscore features. I'm gonna set that equals to all the columns that we want to change. So gender, blood pressure, family, then we're gonna initiate the OneHotEncoder. And also use our column transformer. So transformer, set that equals to column transformer. And then the parameters is take. We're gonna use, for this first parameter, we're gonna call it OneHot. And this first parameter is just for if we need to use it later, in case we were making a pipeline with sklearn, but we're not. But we still need to give it a name. Next, we're gonna call in our OneHot variable that we made over here, which is the OneHotEncoder, and then our categorical features, which we stored in the categorical features variable. Next, we're gonna set the remainder to equals pass-through. And the remainder equals pass-through means that it will keep all the columns that were not transformed, that we're not gonna transform. So these numerical columns, it's gonna keep it in the data frame. So now let's look at the set of variable called transformed x, and call our transformer dot fit. Then we're gonna fit our x variable. Now let's look at the transformer or transformed x, see if there's any mistake. Oh, it's not fit, it's fit underscore transformed function in sklearn. Let's run those cells. We have another mistake. Okay, we need to put brackets around the statements for the column transformer. Now let's run that. Let's see, a given column is not a column of the data frame. So that means we spelled a column wrong, or we left a spaced on exercise. So let's run this cell, hopefully it works. And here you have it. We use OneHotEncoding to transform it, but we see it's in an array and it's not in a data frame. So now let's change it into a data frame, but first we need to write a code to get the column names out. So we're gonna set column names equals to transformer. And we're only doing this in case you want to change this back to a data frame. So I'm going to quickly show you how to do that. If not, we could have just put this into our machine learning model. But before we did that, we would have to change the diagnosis columns to ones and zeros, like we previously did. So let me quickly change the data frame back to how it was with the columns. So transformer.named underscore transformers underscore OneHot dot get feature names out. Then we want the categorical features, and we're gonna change this to toList. Then we're gonna add X, and we want to drop the categorical features, and we set the axis to 1 because we're dealing with the column. .columns.toList. So this is a lot of coding if we want to change it back to a data frame. We don't have to do this. We could just put this into our model as an array, but for those who wants it as a data frame, which is what I like to do, this is what we have to do. So now since we do this and we put it in the variable column names, let's change it to the data frame. Go transformed X, and we set that equals to pd.dataframe transformed underscore X, and we set the columns to equal the column name variable that we just created. Now let's look at our transform underscore X. The F in data frame should be capital. And you see here we got our columns back, but we don't have our diagnosis column. So if we want to add the diagnosis column, just one more step we need to do. And let's call this the final numerical data frame equals pd.concat. We want to concat the transform underscore X and Y. We set axis to 1 because we want to add a column. But remember, our Y is yes or no. It's not converted to numbers yet. So we're going to set final underscore num underscore df diagnosis column to equals final ds diagnosis, and we want to map, and we want to change that to the yes to 1 and no to 0. Now let's take a look at our final data frame. Let's run that. We spelled our transformed X variable wrong. Let's run that. Let's slide along to see if we added our diagnosis, and we did. So this is the longest way when using sklearn to change categorical values in the data frame to numerical. I think using sklearn OneHotEncoding is probably the most tedious one. So now let's move on to handling data with missing values. Let me write a heading. The first way we could deal with data with missing values is to fill them with some value, also known as imputation or imputing data. The next way we could handle it is to simply remove the samples with missing data. Now let's import a data set. Let's call it car sales missing, set that equals read underscore CSV, and the name of our file is car sales missing.csv. Let's look at our data frame, and here you have our data frame. To see how much missing data we have in our data frame, let's call in our car sales missing and set.isNA. Then we use the sum function to add all of it. And you see in the make column, we have 49 missing values, color 50, and all the rest of the columns, we have 50 missing values. So the first way we can handle this is by filling missing data with pandas. We're gonna fill each column individually. So now let's fill the make column. And we're gonna set that equals to, just copy this, and we use the fill NA function. And the make column, just for example's sake, we're gonna fill it with missing. And now we're gonna do the same for the rest of the columns. So I'm just gonna copy this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And the next column is color, and we're also going to fill this with missing. The next column is odometer km. Let me just copy this here. And I think the odometer is a numerical value. And we're going to fill this with the mean. So any missing values, we're going to fill it with the mean of all the values in the column. So we're going to fill NA. Let me copy this. And then at the end, we're going to use the mean function. Next is the doors. And let me see the doors column. It's numerical, but we're not going to fill it with a mean, because you can't have a fraction of a door. Like you can't have 4.1 doors. So I'm just going to fill it in with 4. All the missing ones with 4. And then the next column is the price. And I'm just going to fill this in with the mean. So in the fill in a parameter, I'm going to call the price column and use the mean function to find the mean of the values in the price column and to impute it into the missing values. So now let's look at the Control C, the missing values. See if there's any missing values in our data frame. And you see we filled all of it in. There's no more missing values. So the next way we can do this is by filling the missing values with sklearn. So I'm going to import the data set with missing values again. I'll just copy this. So we could import the original data frame. And then let's give this a different name. Let's call it sk for sklearn. And let's run that. Let's see the sum of the missing values for each column. So first what I'm going to do is show you how to drop the missing values of the data frame. So I'm going to call castles missing underscore na dot drop na. And this drop all the missing values in our data frame. But I'm only going to drop all the missing values in the price column. So all the rows that has missing values in the price column, I'm going to drop it. And to do that, I'm going to use the subset. And then we call our price column. Then I'm going to set the in place to true so the changes stay in our data frame. And now we want to look at the sum of the missing variables in our data frame or missing rows. And you see the price column has no more missing rows because we dropped all of it. If we wanted to drop all, we would just delete this and it will drop all of the values. Now let's fill in the missing values with sklearn. We would need to go up here. We would need to import this. We don't need to since we already imported it. But let me just do it again. Next, I'm going to write a comment to say what I'm doing here. So I'm going to fill categorical values with missing and the numerical values with the mean. The same thing we did above here with pandas, but we're going to do it with sklearn. So I'm going to set a variable called cat. Then we're going to use our simple imputer function in sklearn. And then the parameters, it takes the strategy and we set that equals to constant. And then we use the fill value parameter. And we want to fill it with missing. And for the door column, we're gonna do the same thing we did with the pandas. I want to fill it with 4. So I'm going to set door equals to, let me just copy this. We're only going to change here to 4. Next, we want the numerical columns. Copy paste. And we don't need to fill the value. We just need to set the strategy to mean. So now we need to create the imputer, and like I said in sklearn, filling in missing values is a little bit tedious. I'm going to set imputer equals to column transformer, and then the first parameter I'm going to set it to cat imputer, and this first parameter is just the name we're going to give in case if we were doing a sklearn pipeline, we would need to use this to call it later. And then next we're going to take this cat variable, and then we're going to put the columns that we want to fill with missing. And the columns that we want to fill with missing is the make and the color. So our make column, then our color. Next I'm going to call this next parameter door imputer. Then it's going to take our door variable, column we want to fill the value with for, and that's the door column. Put a bracket here. I also need to put a bracket here, comma. I'm going to call this first parameter num imputer, call our num variable, and the columns that we want to fill in with the mean, which is the odometer. Next, we want to set the remainder equals to pass through, which I said before, it will keep all the columns that was not transformed. Let me put this bracket up here. So next we have to apply the column transfer. Equals imputer fit transform. And we're gonna put our data frame as the parameter. And sklearn will turn this into an array. So let's convert it back into a data frame. So car sales equals pd dot data frame. Our car sales missing sk data frame. Then we want the columns to equals make, color, doors, odometer, then the price. So now let's look at the sum of all the missing values. And let's see if it worked. I need to put a parentheses here. Each of these end in a parentheses. And now let's run that. Got more mistakes. Oh, we need to impute simple imputer, not OneHotEncoder. So simple imputer. Gotta correct all my mistakes here so everything works. Oh, and it's not processing, is sklearn impute. Let's run that. We have another mistake. That's why it's easier to just do this in pandas. So I spelled one of the columns wrong. It's doors with an S. So just bear with me here while I make all these corrections. Let's run that. And here you see it worked. That's why I would rather do this with pandas instead of sklearn. And you see all the empty values in our data frame is imputed with the values. Let's take a look at the data frame. Control C, because we changed this into a data frame. Hot head. Let's run that. And you see we have our data frame intact. So this is how you handle data with missing values with pandas and sklearn, and also how to change categorical columns to numerical columns with pandas and sklearn.